Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming and sharing your noon hour with us. My name is Tom Worthley, Associate Extension Professor. I'm a forester by profession, and I get a lot of questions about what's going to happen this year with gypsy moth caterpillars, and if I could predict the future, why, well, I might not be working here, but either way, many of us have been through this situation where we've observed trees being defoliated by gypsy moth caterpillars the last couple of years. The trees do refoliate to some degree after the outbreak is over, and this has happened in repeated fashion over the last couple of years. It's as bad as I remember seeing it back in the early 1980s, when the last really statewide gypsy moth outbreak occurred. At that time, I was doing field forestry work, marking timber and that sort of thing, and it was really quite an experience to have all that debris raining down and the silk threads hanging down from the trees, and you had to kind of part them in order to make your way through the woods. It was really quite a mess. Well, the caterpillars finally decided to die off at that time. Like any population that explodes, they ate themselves out of the home, put themselves under stress at that time. A virus disease came and killed them off at that time. These days, a different organism is at work, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Gypsy moth is a native of Europe and Asia. You know, its native range is across the European and Asian continent, and was imported to this country in the middle 1800s by a fellow in Boston who thought that he would corner the market on silk manufacture using the silk threads that are produced by gypsy moth caterpillars. The experiments that were done at that time didn't work out very well, and he just let the caterpillars go. And they found plenty of suitable food sources and became established, became naturalized in the New England area, and eventually spread across the region and into Canada, out to the Midwestern part of the country, slowly but surely, year after year. Gypsy moth outbreaks, severe gypsy moth outbreaks at the front of this spreading area of where they become naturalized here. There have been a series of severe defoliations, over the decades since that time, and the most recent one being in the 1980s, as I mentioned, before 2015, 16, and 17. Excuse me. The outbreak in the 80s had the effect of bringing in some natural agents that over the years have had an effect in keeping the gypsy moth caterpillar population somewhat under control. The caterpillar is just part of the life cycle of the gypsy moth organism, and it's a short life cycle. They live a year, or a little less than a year. The egg hatches. Right now, they've hatched this year. The caterpillars are crawling about, and works as a larva for 2 to 3 months. The larva starts out as a very small, little, fuzzy little caterpillar that immediately starts to climb up the tree and feed on the leaves of the tree. When they've consumed enough leaf material, they descend to the ground on these silk strings where they have to molt. In order for a caterpillar or any insect to grow, it needs to change its skin. The outer shell splits open, the new caterpillar crawls out, it a little bit forms a new exoskeleton, if you will. And this happens 3 times in the course of the 2 to 3 months that the larvae is active. And then the caterpillar matures, it goes into chrysalis, a pupal state, and emerges a couple weeks later as an adult. And the adult flies around. The male adult flies around looking for a mate. The females do not fly, and they just hang out on the bark of trees and other structures and wait for a male to find them. And after they mate, the female lays eggs, and the eggs persist there for the rest of the summer and through the winter until they hatch again. That's right. Each female moth will lay between 500 and 1,000 eggs. Here's let's see, wrong button. There we go. Here's the egg mass, just hatching up, and there'll be 500 to 1,000 eggs in a typical egg mass, and they're found all over the bark of trees. A lot of times they're in a protected spot under the bark flaps, or in places where they're somewhat protected, and they persist there all summer, fall, and winter. And the actual mating process and egg laying process does not take very long. The adults live for a week or so while they mate and hatch, and then that's the end of it. So it's a critter that can do a lot of damage in a very short period of time. The gypsy moth caterpillars have the ability to survive, to persist, to find a mate, even when the population numbers are very, very low. That the male caterpillar has a set of antennae that are designed to pick up a pheromone chemical scent on the air, and they'll fly for a long, long distance to find a female. So even when the populations are low, we're still getting a few gypsy moths that persist in the environment just because of that ability. There's a picture, another picture of an egg mass with there's a penny mounted on the tree there to give you a sense of the size, and mid to late stage caterpillar. It's a black caterpillar with black spots and red spots, very, very hairy, and the caterpillars have some predators in the environment. Some birds will eat them when they're very, very small. But when they get to be this size, those hairs kind of protect them. They discourage the predation of forest birds like scarlet tanagers or more orioles. The very small caterpillars, when they first hatch out and they first feed and they begin to descend on these strings of silk, can be picked up by the wind and carried like a kite, for very long distances. And so they get spread around the countryside, on the wind, basically. They're very light and easy to be picked up by the wind. As we mentioned, the male has these antennas that are very good at picking up the scent of the female, and they can fly a long way. These are the critters that you see flying around your porch light at nighttime and that sort of thing. The female has a beautiful set of wings, but doesn't fly at all. It just crawls up to a protected spot on the tree, lays eggs, and it dies. The only damage the gypsy moth does is during the larval stage, and the only damage it does is to the leaves. It's not like other larvae, boring larvae, they get to the wood of the tree and hold anything like that. The only damage it does is to the leaves of the tree. And only during that early summer time. It's when the caterpillars get to be high numbers that they do this foliation damage. So you can imagine it's millions and millions of caterpillars that are at work doing the defoliation on the trees for this short period of time. I said that I think there's a statistic here on one of these slides that one gypsy moth caterpillar can eat as much as 11 square feet of leaf area in its life. So that's quite a bit of foliage. And when the trees are defoliated, most hardwood trees, hardwood meaning trees that are deciduous, your maples, birches, oaks, hickories, They have the ability to reset new buds through hormonal processes. They convert cells in the apical meristem to a new bud and send out a new set of leaves. But in order to do so, the tree needs to draw on stored reserve. During the summertime, when all the leaves are out, the trees are busy doing their job. They're collecting solar radiation and nutrients and moisture from the soil, creating carbohydrate to grow that new grain, to increase in size, extend their branches. And once all that is done, then the photosynthate that's manufactured is stored in the tree, in the trunk, in the root system, to be used next spring when it's time to send out new leaves and new buds and new flowers. And it's the ability of the tree to store those reserves that gives it the energy to be able to do that in the springtime before photosynthesis can take place. So they generally have stored reserves to be able to send out a new set of leaves with their foliage. The caterpillars will feed on most everything. At least they'll try. And if you can imagine, these caterpillars come out and they find 1 million acres of oak trees, and that's their favorite food. The oak trees, the beech trees, that's their favorite. That's what they want to have. If their leaves are all chewed off the oak trees, or they find themselves in a maple stand, well, they'll chew the leaves off the maple. They'll chew the needles off your pine tree. They'll chew the needles off your hemlock tree. Pines and hemlocks do not have the ability to send new buds and send out new leaves. If they become defoliated, they die. Okay? So it's just the deciduous trees that have that ability. And the one species that they won't eat, that they can't eat for some reason, is visible in this photograph. This is taken across a valley, in the lower part of the valley where there's lots of moisture. They hadn't really gone to work on the foliage here. On the dry ridge top, we see a fair amount of defoliation. Here is a taller tree that's green. Here's a taller tree that's green. Here's a taller tree that's green. Here's a taller tree that's green. You know what kind of tree that is? Anybody? Well, you do. Of course you do. It's a tulip tree. Tulip tree. Liriodendron tulipifera. They can't eat the leaves on the tulip tree. Imagine you're a Gypsy Moth caterpillar. You've just changed your skin. You're at the 3rd instar. You climb 120 feet to the top of a tulip tree, and you get out on the branch and you find, oh no, I fell off it. It can be a problem if you're a Gypsy Moth caterpillar. But be that as it may, that's the one species that they aren't consuming. Where the big problem comes is when you have other environmental factors at work. And what happened in Connecticut in the last years was the fact that we had two very dry summers, very dry in the springtime, early summer, in 2016, 2017. And the population of Gypsy Moth caterpillars exploded, and it was related to that. But the trees were already under stress. So we're seeing some mortality as a result of the fact that the trees, in those stressful conditions, defoliated, tried to send out new leaves, did not have reserves to it can be a problem both at the individual tree scale and at the stand scale around the area. This is an image, a satellite image taken from the CT Eco website of the area. This is Willimantic, stores, eastern Connecticut. You can see Route 6 here. This is 2014 aerial imagery, and if we superimpose the same image from 2016, you can see the extent of barren areas, defoliated areas, as serious as it was in 2016. It's somewhat localized, but very severe in certain locations. East of here, across the Connecticut River in the Chester and Haddam area, we also had this kind of scale of defoliation in 2016. Retired Professor Emeritus Dan Simcoe collected some data and produced an image from satellite data to try to get a sense of the severity of the outbreak. This is Patchogue Forest in eastern Connecticut, Patchogue State Forest, and was kind of showing where they had the most serious outbreaks in that area. And just as a piece of information, the state forestry people in the Patchogue Forest are in the middle right now of a sort of a panic salvage of dead trees in some areas on Patchogue Forest, where they've lost like 200 acres of oak trees as a result of this defoliation. And that didn't leak out last year. It didn't come back. Foliated, boom, we're done. So, and it was because of the combination of dryness and defoliation at the same time. So, to that end, or with a little deeper analysis of that, our colleague here, James Hurd, in the Department of Natural Resources and the Environment, took a different set of satellite data for 53 towns in eastern Connecticut, and from the Landsat satellite, and performed some analyses that look at total vegetation and total vegetation stress. So basically, what we're looking at here are areas that indicate vegetative stress from data that indicates the total amount of vegetation in the area. I'm not sure why that was. Kind of interesting. Different computer. This was supposed to be a close-up over here of this area, and it's blanking it out. Anyway, the other really interesting thing that he was able to do with the data was also collect some data about moisture, total moisture in the system. This includes soil moisture as well as moisture that's tied up in vegetation, and plot that out and look at the difference between 2015 and 2016. And you can see that the moisture stress areas tend to coincide very closely with the vegetation stress areas in these two. And so he looked at that. He also looked at the differences between 2015 and 2017. As luck would have it, in 2017 we did get some moisture, we did get some rain later on in the season, and one of the natural predators, if you will, of Gypsy Moth caterpillars came into play. An introduced fungus from Japan, Entomophaga maimaiga, was brought into this country in the 1980s, and it didn't seem to do much at that time. But it has been present in the environment. It's a fungus that lives in the soil, and like any fungus, it's going to be more prolific under warm and moist conditions. So things warm up, we get a little moisture, there's a little bit more inoculum of the fungus in the soil, and the Gypsy Moth caterpillars are susceptible to this. And we get a large number of Gypsy Moth caterpillars descending to the soil. Well, the fungus well that, and so they infect the Gypsy Moth caterpillars. They in turn infect their friends. They leave deposits on the leaves. Others pick it up from the soil, and that goes to work on the population. So all of the Gypsy Moth caterpillars that you see here on this large oak tree are dead caterpillars, just hanging. Just, if you were to touch one of them, it would break open and a lot of green liquid food would come out of it, and kind of stinky stuff when you have, like 100,000 of them at the base of a tree rotting away. It can be, quite an experience. But the dry conditions that were shown, the dry moisture stress conditions, if you will, have the effect of depressing the activity of the fungus, and therefore allowed these populations to be caterpillars to be greater. And when the fungus kicked back in, and was a little bit more prolific. It went to work on these high populations of caterpillars. There are some other agents that do go to work on the caterpillars that are in the environment. The thing is that when the population gets so large, these agents can't really keep up. I mentioned the birds, so armadillo birds will eat the caterpillars when they're small. There are some vertebrates, mice and shrews, that will grab the caterpillars when they're on the ground at night and eat them. There are some invertebrates, ants and ground beetles, parasitic flies and wasps that are also predators of Gypsy moth caterpillars. There's a viral disease, wilt, that is one of the diseases that affects them. And this pathogen we mentioned, it's another thing with a different computer that changes your font size so you can't read what's up there. This Entomophaga maimaiga is the main agent that's been keeping the population in check since the 1980s. Caterpillars. This is a little sassafras tree about 6 inches in diameter that's covered with dead caterpillars, and it's just they get to a point, boom, they're dead, and they eventually disappear. But the wasp is an interesting thing. This is a little video. Let's see if we can get it to play. It changes the orientation, but you can see these little wasps crawling all over the egg mass and poking little holes in it where they're actually eating the eggs or feeding on the eggs in some way. And this occurs during the late summer, and beginning in July, as soon as the egg masses are out there, these wasps go to work. And so if I'm going to do any sort of egg mass control, I wait until after the wasps are done. I'd like the wasps to get their fill so that they're happy. They're still there next year. And we're providing them with their little food source in the meantime. So James also looked at refoliation. What was the difference between July 2015 and September 2017? And when you look at this area, you can see some places where refoliation was not complete. We're still showing vegetation stress in some of these areas. And same with the moisture stress. Still indicated during September 16 that there just is not as much moisture in the system as there would have been under non-defoliated conditions. And what this kind of indicates to me is that it's still a bit dry. A lot of the refoliation is not complete. Many of those trees that refoliated either grew just little stubs of leaves or little partial leaves, or if the foliation wasn't complete, trees are trying to persist through the summer on fragments of leaves that are still left on the tree. And so the system is just not holding as much moisture as it might have before. With respect to defoliation, the conclusions from this analysis is that the 2017 defoliation over here was more widespread. We can see defoliated areas up in the northeast corner, down here in the Scotland area, down here in the Norwich area, whereas in 2016 it was much more severe, but much more localized, not as much defoliation showing up in some of those areas. And the analysis also shows total biomass produced, and during the course of 2017, there was, the total biomass in this area increased. Just because trees grow, they produce new foliage, new wood, new branches, and that sort of thing, and particularly in areas that weren't defoliated. But in some areas, the refoliation and the amount of biomass was actually less than in other areas. So the moisture stress analysis is similar in that we show this still in 2000 at the end of 2006, at the end of the growing season of 2016. You know, we're still showing moisture stress in these localized areas, much more widespread in 2017. So what can we do? What can we do if we have gypsy moth caterpillars? Well, this is a little trick I tried at home on some small pine trees that I have in the garden. I was really concerned when I began to see the beetles dropping on the ground. And if I lose all the needles off of my little pine tree, then I lost my little pine trees. And so I just went out and I took a couple of strips of Gorilla Tape and turned them sticky side up, put them around the tree, and it served as a barrier for the gypsy moths here. They just would not cross it. They would not go onto it. And that was effective for a while. I had to change it out after a couple of weeks, but by that time, they were pretty much done. Historically, there were all kinds of spray products that were brought to bear. They tried aerial spraying back in the 1980s and that sort of thing, but there was a real big concern about chemical residuals of chemical products. There were some biological-based insecticides that were a little more targeted to gypsy moths that were tried out. There are still some of those in use now. What I did at home was I mixed up a bunch of soapy water, really soapy water, in my hose spray. And you can buy a horticultural soap, but any soap that's real true soap will work. Like I use like real soap. This detergent is not real soap. I've used Dawn liquid for all kinds of stuff, but not real soap. Anyway, sprayed the foliage of my little trees, and it was pretty good about knocking the gypsy moth caterpillars down and getting them. Oh, the ones that crawl up on the house, getting them off the house. What the soap does is it forms a film and it puts up the breathing apparatus of the insect. The insect breathes through holes in their abdomen, and the soap kind of comes up those holes and prevents them to breathe. Of course, I was spraying so much I was probably drowning too. But the soapy water works pretty well. You can get horticultural oils that release the water that work in the same way. They have traps you can buy to catch the animals. Now, which animals are they going to catch? The males. Right. And if you bought a little trap and you hung it from a tree and you caught 50 males in your trap, okay, you feel real successful. There's 10,000 other males out there flying around, and they fly a long way to find the female. So I don't think the traps are all that good. A question over here, Mike.
Yeah, with the tape, Tom, if they're laying egg masses high up in the tree, how does the tape really help?
An egg mass that hatches high up in the tree, those insects are going to those little bitty caterpillars that will feed on the leaf for a little while, and then they're going to descend. And
So you're catching them
before they go back up.
So the heaviest defoliation happens when the larger ones go back up.
Notice there happens to be this great big oak tree behind the pine tree. All the gypsy moths that hatched off of that tree and climbed to the top of it descended, and they crawled along the grass, and they eventually found this pine tree, and they started to climb up. And they wouldn't have found oak leaves if they were pine needles, and they would have chewed on them. And so I'm trying to prevent that from happening. I don't get 100%, because some descend, and they descend into the ground of the pine tree. So there's you can't get every single one of them, but these are ways of protecting that one or two trees that you care about on your landscape. Yeah. Well, you do get some dead matter. It's not necessarily all gypsy moth caterpillars. Everything flying and stuff. But it's mostly because just weathering of the adhesive. You get a little rain, you get a little this, and so there are other wrapping techniques. People will put burlap around the tree and then paint it with a sticky substance you can obtain called tanglewood. You buy a whole kit that allows you to do that. The notion of using the burlap is that if you put the tanglewood directly on the bark, then it will, that sticky substance, you put it directly on the bark, it will impede the respiration ability of that section of bark, and you could do some damage to the tree. This is one of those things too, is that you have to monitor this, and I couldn't leave that there all year. That would be a problem. But for a few weeks, it's not going to damage the tree, and I get it off when the gypsy moth season is over. So if your tree is large and you have rough bark with channels, and you might have to plug them up in some way. That's the gypsy moth going through, but for a small tree like this, it was pretty effective way of doing it. So now, if you're a woodland owner and you have stands of trees that you're concerned about, well, we are expecting to see some count this year, and in some places it will be significant. And trees that are over mature, already stressed, are going to be trees we expect to see affected first. The drought-impacted stands. And when I say drought-impacted, I'm not necessarily talking about the driest sites. You have trees that are growing on a site that's completely dry, well-drained soil or on top of a ridge or something like that. They might not be as badly affected as a tree in a place that usually has plenty of moisture, but you get it. So I'd be surprised at some of this is one of my best tree growing sites. I would think that the trees would be becoming very nicely, or they might become overstressed because they're not used to that condition. So highlighted in bold here is the message that if you're concerned about your woodland, your acres of woodland area, it's a good idea to talk with a forester and help have them walk the property with you, and do a visual analysis, do a visual inspection, if you will, see how the trees are doing. Connecticut has a certification program for practitioners at 3 levels of practice, and the 3rd level is that of forester. So you want to make sure you're talking to somebody who is a licensed forester, not a logger or something like that. They can do the kind of analysis you need in terms of determining which trees might be affected, determining the numbers, the portions of trees that might be affected on the property. Oak trees can be worse than money. Notice I put a little asterisk there. I just found out yesterday. The most lucrative oak log market where they harvest oak trees, they pick the logs and load them on containers. That's the shop. I don't know if it has anything to do with it. But a lot of it has dropped out of the export market, at least for the time being. So, not that the oaks aren't still valuable, but domestic prices from local sawmills have always been a little bit less than the value of logs that get shipped on the export market. So if there's no export market, then the landlords don't get domestic prices for the logs. But it still can be significant, so it's worth talking to a forester about that if there's a sufficient volume to be harvested on your property. You want to know what you have out there and what you have to work with and what value might be before you start engaging somebody to cut your trees down for you. You can get a lot more info from the Deep Forestry Division web pages and the Connecticut Agricultural Experimentation web pages. have lots of information that you can access to learn more about these sorts of questions. On UConn campus, our arborist will be spraying some of the on-campus trees using bio-based sprays. I was just asking what they're using, and this will be on a tree-by-tree basis for trees that are valuable from an aesthetic standpoint or aesthetic standpoint. Any trees that don't leaf out, they'll be removed and probably replaced with something else. In the forest, in UConn forest, we will do some salvage of dead trees wherever it's possible, where it's appropriate, where we can access them, and that sort of thing. And if we have large areas, you know, I have 10 acres of dead trees, well, that will involve engaging a logging contractor, a tree here, a tree there, we can do with our own student crew. We'll be doing inspections early in the summertime. We have a number of graduate students that are doing various types of research with unmanned aerial vehicle systems, the drones, doing photography, imagery, and that sort of thing. And we'll see if we can get them to, fly over the canopy in a few spots and see if we're seeing a lot of defoliation or not. And anything we salvage from the forest will go into fuel wood and sawlogs. We have quite a lucrative fuel wood business here. We can keep up with it. So it'll be good to have some firewood to sell in the fall. Here's some of our crew from last year. These folks don't work for us anymore, but you get them all trained and then they graduate. We do professional training. We have some small equipment that we can use for doing this kind of work. We do some primary processing with a portable sawmill for specialty logs or unique species or something like that. And try to make some interesting projects out of the wood that we create with that. A little value added. Here's a picture I took this morning. This is behind the Middlesex County Extension Center. And this is a big black oak tree that's been there for a long, long time. Notice how all the other trees have started to leaf out. And this one has not. And so I'm a little concerned. If I get a little closer, I can see that I have some partial refoliation this year on some of the lower limbs of this tree. If you look up in the top, the upper branches are not leafing. Now it's either just late or it's on its way out. Now this tree was an old tree. It's kind of senescing anyway. And here's another just perspective from underneath. We have some foliage you can see, leaves on the lower branches, and the upper branches we don't have. So we might be losing this old friend on our property, and we'll wait and see. What's the quote from the Princess And we'll watch it and see what happens over time. My colleagues will line up for firewood if we have to remove the tree, and maybe we'll process some of it with something unique. And so, but all is not lost. Without moving my feet and just turning a little bit and aiming the camera down, there in the weeds and amongst all the invasive vines, here's offspring from that tree. A little oak seedling growing up right near it, and right where I took this picture, I just turned around and I aimed down and I took this picture here. So we will still have a nice spreading black oak tree at that location someday still, but if we do something. And so with that, I say thank you, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to educate. Yeah.
So how does it fit weather for the fungus this year?
Well, that's the good news. The fungus is in the system. It showed up last year, finally. Killed off a lot of Gypsy Moth Outbreaks. This spring we've had adequate moisture. Now we've been getting some regular precipitation. The soil is nice and moist. Those places where the water table is high. And so keeping my fingers crossed that we don't get 3 weeks of dry weather. Oh yes, because they come in on the wind, and you don't get any of the ones that are high up in the trees. I entertained myself one afternoon at a oil break coffee shop. I went around spraying egg masses, and I must have sprayed thousands of them, but I still had defoliation. Those first photographs, that's right outside my front door, those defoliated trees. But I sprayed hundreds and hundreds of egg masses, and I could read, and I could see, but they're 8 feet up. So it's only a partial effect. What do you mean by what? You said you got it in your spraying with soap. Yeah, it's got to be reasonable. Oh, well, there's soap and there's detergent. Both are cleaning agents, and you want to use soap, not detergent. So, a lot, even some of your bathing bars are made of something that's not only maybe partial soap, and dish detergent, laundry detergent, soap. Now, I don't know the difference in the chemicals. I know that raw soap is made from lye and ash. It comes alcohol and you boil off and do soap. What the chemical constituents of detergent are? Oh, of soap? Yeah. I would get Ivory Flakes and dissolve them in water. And well, you have to ask them. They're here in the audience. But the various biological sprays are generally made of something that either has one of the disease-causing agents built into it, where the viruses or bacteria or something like that, or it has a natural compound that interfaces with the functioning of the insect in some way. The latter is yes, ma'am. We're not healthy. We can find a product that's in the lab. Conserve. It's organic. Very, very safe. You can look it up. Yes, sir. I did see how oh my gosh, it's very possible. The very, very small, when they first hatch out, they're an 1/8 of an inch long. And with all these fuzzy hairs and a long soap tail, and they're going to be very easily transported by wind. They are also transported by animals that move around and vehicles that move around, I'm sure. And when the vehicle stops, the bird falls off and climbs off and goes to find a tree somewhere. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if some transportation takes place in that way. But you imagine you're this little 1/8 of an inch long caterpillar at the top of an oak tree, and the wind comes up to pick you up and carry you somewhere else. What is your I don't have my next one. So far, so good. In this part of the state, I saw a lot more active egg masses from last year than over in my area. We had a few, but nothing more than I normally spot along the way. If the fungus remains active, then I would expect that we would begin to see some partial defoliations in die-off. That's kind of what I'm expecting. I anticipate there'll be some areas where trees simply don't leaf out this year. That becomes a question about, do I salvage these trees? Do I leave them to rot? Property. Big old black oak tree like behind the extension center. It was right next to the driveway where there's no question. I didn't take it down because it had it would fall out, branches and stuff like that. Back corner of the property is not going to be a hazard, so they just let it go and just keep an eye on it. Plus, it's a very expensive thing to tackle the tree that size. Take it down. Well, thank you all for your attention. And one more question over here. Yes. The high-end export market that takes all the logs that have no defects, that are peeled for the year or sliced to make fine furniture and paneling. They want a log from a live tree. In the sawmill market, where they saw the log into boards, trim the edges off the boards, the tree has died and there's some discoloration. It's not a big problem. It becomes a problem when the tree's been standing around for a while and borers really work up. Then the boards will have like holes. For you and me, working in our little wood shop to make some project at home, we wouldn't really care about that. For the commercial industry, where specifications are important, like if you can still do some that. In the low-rate markets, for products like pallets and railroad ties or interior components, furniture that's upholstered or something like that, those prices are not going to be something that's exposed to tabletop, flooring, that sort of thing. Unless you're constructing character, and you want your floor to look stressed or something like, then it might have it. But it's still, that oak log will remain sound for a while. You can have it laid around for 2 or 3 years. So it's still really Yep. Well, thank you very much. And we have another important issue of this. Well, the next thing on our list is mineral ash water.